What's up, everybody? Welcome in. You got your Phil Perry right there. We are -1 Castle. A blizzard of 3.7 inches has hit Nashville. That has laid our guy Castle low. You'll see him this weekend on pregame and postgame live. Phil.
Prayers up.
Prayers up is right. Prayers up a little bit for the Patriots, too, as they come into the stretch run and get ready for the playoffs. And the more I think about this, Phil, the more I think the Patriots probably should treat this season finale not just as a regular season game, but as one of good import, great import even. The reason I think that they need to keep their knives sharp or actually continue to sharpen them.
I agree with you 100%, Tom. Bill Belichick talked about it in his press conference this week, where he said, when we are really on top of things, when we're at our best, when we're practicing well, and when we're focused, we can be really good. That's essentially how he put it. And when they don't, that's when they've fallen on their faces. We saw it early in that Colts game, early in that Bills game. They just didn't come to play. And so you don't want to risk that against Miami, Tom, for a few reasons. Number one, yes, of course, you want to just stay sharp for the postseason, but there could be seeding stuff at play here.
Mm-hmm.
Crazier things have happened than the Jets beating the Bills in the season finale and the Patriots potentially winning the division, getting a home playoff game. I think the other reason, Tom, you got to win this Dolphins game is because you really don't want to see the Kansas City Chiefs. And that matchup would be in play and pretty strongly in play if the Patriots end up losing to Miami and the Chiefs beat the Broncos.
And remember, all of these games, the Patriots will be on the road. So whether it's Buffalo or Cincinnati or Kansas City, Patriots are a wild card if they don't win the division. In addition to the seeding, in addition to the opponent, when you look at the Patriots' second half of the season or this long stretch of success, we would be whistling past the graveyard if we didn't cite the fact that the teams that they have beaten during their winning streak, aside from San Diego, were teams that were either objectively kind of bad or not at full strength. Carolina, Cleveland, Atlanta, Tennessee, Jacksonville. Combined score in those wins was 130-26. Those games were consecutive. Right before Carolina, 130-26. I needed to say that again. The Patriots really have only one win in this stretch since they went off after Dallas, where you would say they beat an objectively good team in a hostile situation, and that's San Diego, 27-24, full complement of Chargers players. I did say San Diego. I'll never stop. But that's the only win that they had. We could look at Buffalo, 14-10, but that was just a kind of a monument to something, either their physicality or the Bills' stupidity or Bill Belichick's genius, but it can't be used really as a strong indicator. So really the San Diego game is the only game against an objectively good team with all its players that the Patriots beat. Miami is a pretty good team. They're probably better than Carolina, Atlanta, Tennessee at that point with all the players that had out, or Jacksonville. So that's why I think this is a good test and should be treated as ostensibly kind of a playoff game, pseudo playoff game.
Sure. And I think it'll be a relatively hostile environment when you just factor in the conditions, Tom. I mean, Even that Chargers game, it was not I know you're half kidding, but it was not a hostile environment by any means. It was, you had as many Patriots fans there as you did Chargers fans. And the one time they've really been on the road in a difficult environment this year, again, aside from that Buffalo game, would be Indianapolis. And we know how that one started and how it looked. And that crowd was juiced. And I think the Patriots had trouble communicating, and it led to some big plays for Indy's defense. And so, is that something that they can work on in this season finale game against Miami as well, being away from home and still executing and playing a clean game, Tom, because we've agreed on this. They're not good enough to play not cleanly and beat good teams. So can you execute? Can you be sound when you're on the road in a tough spot?
I already know that my feeling on the Patriots when they do lose, unless they win the Super Bowl, is not going to be that they're not good. It's going to be that they're not ready. I already know that that's going to be my conclusion. They're not ready yet. Am I letting them off the hook a little bit?
Well, Tom, I think they were ready to be better than what they've shown this year, because that 2-game stretch, those back-to-back losses really killed them. And they are good enough to beat the Colts on the road, in my opinion. they just didn't play cleanly. I mean, if they don't give up a punt block for a touchdown or Brandon King doesn't jump off sides, it's 10 points in that game right there.
So if they're good enough, as you say, and I agree, then they weren't ready to bring the level of urgency. That's why they're not ready yet. They don't know what it takes, regardless of what's on the side of their helmet and what uniforms they are and how much Bill Belichick has accomplished in this league. The complement of players isn't ready. That's a ... Hopefully it's a yet.
I think they are. I think they just threw up on their shoes in a couple of big spots when they couldn't do it. Does that mean, that like Jakob Johnson missing a block? Does that mean this team isn't ready to be more competitive and maybe have a home playoff game? Because that's what you're talking about. It's one bad play.
Yes.
Puts you on the road and maybe means you lose your first round game. I don't think so. I think it's just I don't think they're not ready as a group. I think they brain farted. And
somebody screwed it up, whether it was Jakob Johnson or Cam Akord or the whole communication prior to that play or the noise. I think those are not ready level of focus things.
But like, just to bring up a high profile example, right? Like
this is such an elusive description by me. I can move it wherever I want to.
Well, but so here's the thing, like good teams that are ready can have those moments. The Kansas City Chiefs in the 2018 AFC Championship game, were they not ready because Dee Ford aligned offsides, or was that just a boneheaded moment that ruined their season?
They weren't ready.
To me, it was the latter. They were a good team.
They weren't ready. They weren't ready to be on their details.
Against a good team. They screwed up against a good team. They were ready, quote unquote, ready. I think the Patriots were ready to be better than a wild card exit. They're not ready to win a Super Bowl. And Tom, I would say it's not because they're good enough. To me, they're not good enough to win a Super Bowl. You just don't have enough talent at some pretty important spots. The secondary is not deep enough. The wide receiver group isn't explosive enough. The quarterback might not be ready. I think you could pin that on him, but I don't think the team is talented enough to get to that final point. They're not good enough right now.
I'll tell you, arguing in your favor, Jonathan Taylor's game sealing run was through a hole that was occupied to a differing degree by two guys who have like 25 years of NFL experience, Dante Hightower and Devin McCourty. So they're ready. They're ready. Before we get into a ranking of the AFC quarterbacks, we mentioned the Chiefs briefly. Were you part of that spirited discussion the other day on Early Edition when I said the Chiefs are gaggers?
I was not. No.
Okay. So we were talking about the teams to be afraid of in the AFC playoffs. And I said, I'd be more scared of the Chiefs if they weren't such chokers. They choked in 18. They were choking in 19 against San Francisco, a team they were better than. They choked in 20. I don't care about the lack of offensive line protection. They tried to choke against Houston in 18 as well. They're gaggers. They did
win the Super Bowl one of those years.
They did. They did. And they needed their best player to play out of his mind at the end. They were down 10 points. One Super Bowl from this complement and contingent of players. That's why, to me, look, Andy Reid's a brilliant X's and O's guy. But I look at that stuff and I'm like, they're gaggers.
They're not ready.
They gagged in 2015. Can't remember what game it was, but they did.
The Alex Smith era. I know what you're saying, Tom. I just think it's hard, right? That's what it is. They're in the mix all of these years, making them a very good team. Are they the Eagles? Are you saying they're the Eagles, the Andy Reid Eagles, which I think you could also say were gaggers, or the 90s Bills? I don't think they're there because they've won one. All right. And their quarterback is otherworldly. He's having a down year. This is a down year for him, and he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Well,
so I would say I just wrote about this for NBCSportsBoston.com, do a quick cross promotion there. Toughest matchup for me. You tell me where you hate these rankings. I say the Titans are the worst matchup for the Patriots. Then I've got Chiefs second, then Bills, then Colts, even though if they were to see the Colts in the first round, that one would actually be at home. Then Bengals. And then you've got some really unlikely matchups down the line here. Chargers, Ravens, Raiders, Steelers.
I think the Bengals are scarier than the Colts because of the quarterback. But the Colts have already lined up across from you and beaten you. Which let's conclude this portion before we get into a spirited discussion with Steve Palazzolo about Brady or Rodgers as the MVP. Before we get to that, I want to get your appraisal of the quarterbacks, because we're going to hear it stated that Mac Jones, compared to the other quarterbacks, is a bottom rung guy. And I say, okay, that's because the other guys are on high rungs. If we were to rank our AFC quarterbacks heading into the playoffs, unless this changes, I would have it Mahomes, Allen, Burrow over Herbert, just based upon the way they're playing, then Tannehill, then Mac Jones, then Carson Wentz. I don't think I'm going to get any argument from you anywhere.
You're really not. The one I would probably think about flipping would be Burrow for Herbert. Again, I think there's just some recency bias happening with the Bengals right now. Herbert, to me, the combination of the physical skill set along with all the other stuff, I don't know if he's as cool under pressure, as poised as Joe Burrow, but man, I mean, Mahomes and Allen are going to be near the top of every single list based on their physical traits alone for like a long, long time. I think Justin Herbert is very soon going to be in that category if he's not going to get there, in the next couple of weeks here. So that's the one that I would think about, but I think you've got it right. I think Wentz is worse than Mac Jones. I think some people would push back on that because Wentz's numbers are a little bit better in some areas, but Tom, we saw it in Indy. I mean, they don't trust him and they should. He is not a very good player.
Yeah, he can short circuit at any time. Be that as it may, it's a fun class of American Football Conference quarterbacks. You're going to hear a fun conversation coming up after the break between Steve Palazzolo from Pro Football Focus, longtime friend of the program, and myself. He thinks that Tom Brady should be the MVP. I feel like my vote eventually is going to be cast for Aaron Rodgers. A lot of Rodgers Brady talk this week. A lot of Rodgers MVP talk. We'll get into it after the break with Steve. So look, there's our old friend Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus magnate. Additionally, he's in his parents' basement in North Reading because he came home for the holidays. You can see the Christmas tree still. You said you are a what today, Steve?
I'm a walking stereotype of, the writer, blogger, whatever in his parents' basement in my childhood home. So make fun of me all you want, but I'm back here to visit and excited.
All right. And for those of you who are Brady loyalists, and I would say that I am kind of, but I'm more realistic. I understand that what has happened in the latter half of this season means Aaron Rodgers should be the most valuable player instead of Tom Brady. But Steve has said that once he started to see a rise in Rodgers' love, he was going to step in and grab us all by the back of the neck and demonstrate WAR war. So why does Brady deserve to be the MVP instead of Aaron Rodgers when Rodgers has thrown 20 touchdowns and one pick since Halloween and only lost one game, and Tom is 19-9 and lost 3?
Because the season started before Halloween. That's the first thing. All right. So you MVP voters and all of your recency bias, and I can only remember the last couple months and all that stuff. So I'll get into the exact details, but hypothetically, Tom Brady's first game of the year was against the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe we didn't know how good the Cowboys were going to be then, but what if that game happened in week 15 and his bad game against the Saints happened in week 1? All of a sudden you'd be flipping. Oh, Tom Brady just beat the NFC East champs with a fourth quarter comeback. He threw 4 touchdowns and 380 yards against the Dallas Cowboys. That happened during this season, by the way. That was 2021. So we're looking for the MVP of the entire season. And I'm not just using these small examples to make my point. I'm using the big examples. PFF WAR, wins above replacement, just like they have in baseball.
On your point. It does matter how you're doing on down the stretch. And that's why I'm probably going to be the turd in the punch bowl on Mac Jones and go with Jamar Chase.
No, but Mac Jones has taken a body of work and lowered the level because it's not like just like a 1-2 horse race. And it's like, well, this guy had a good week. He jumps in front, right? It all matters. Brady was actually so much better than Rodgers in the first 8, 9, 10 weeks of the season. The other point that I tried to make here is that Rodgers' interception total, it's a little fluky, right? I posted some videos of Tom Brady, 4 of his 12, because you're going to look at touchdown interception ratio, right? Brady, 40-12, Brady, 35-4 for Rodgers. Well, 4 of Brady's interceptions, 3 of them are dropped, one's a Hail Mary. So now all of a sudden he has
slow
8.
that down. Say that again. So of Brady's 12 interceptions, say it again.
12 interceptions.
Yep.
4 of them are completely fluky.
Ricocheted
One was
off the hands of his teammate.
Yes, screen pass right to Mike Evans, dropped. Off of Leonard Fournette's hands, dropped. Off of Jalen Darden, took the ball, threw it up in the air backwards for an interception against the football team, and then there's a Hail Mary in there as well. So just those 4. Aaron Rodgers has 4 interceptions, and he has 0 interceptions of that same ilk, off drops or something that just wasn't his fault. Just as a quick example.
Well, maybe Brady makes his teammates more nervous.
Well, there you go. He's just not a good leader. Clearly, after 20 plus years, we know that Brady makes his teammates nervous and they don't play for him. So look, yes. I think there's a lot of those small examples that I think have added up. The macro, the big example for me, PFF WAR, our PFF grade, where I think we do the best job of isolating quarterback play from his teammates and adding this context and saying, when Tom makes a great throw and it gets dropped, we give him proper credit. There's not a traditional stat or an advanced stat that does properly assign that credit. And Brady has a higher grade than Aaron Rodgers this year. And he's done it for an extra 160, 170 dropbacks. So he's therefore added more value to his team, which is the question we're trying to answer with this MVP award.
Steve, now I don't think that the recency bias should be dismissed because the season is a story and it gets more compelling and the games get more urgent as they go along. So I think finished product or closer to finished product games matter in crunch time. So that shutout against New Orleans, even with all the players Brady was missing, it's tough to look at that and say,
I get it. It's also ironic that Aaron Rodgers pretty much had the same exact game against that same exact team. And yes, it happened in week 1. It happened in week 1, right? Which
makes your point.
When you get your ballot, it's like, hey, Tom, who's the 2021 NFL MVP? And that has to be a part of the equation. Aaron Rodgers scored 3 points against the Saints. Brady scored 0, and they missed a field goal. I mean, it was basically the same thing. In fact, by our grades, we had Brady with the higher grade in his game against the Saints, his dud. We actually had Rodgers with the lower grade in his win against the Seahawks. They won 17-0, and he was terrible. Week 10, I believe it was. So again, it's that context of what the player is bringing from a value standpoint to his team.
Yeah. One of the compelling arguments for Brady is he's got 743 dropbacks. Rodgers has 587. And I do think volume matters, the amount of time you're out there. But still, I'm going to have a hard time not voting for Aaron Rodgers. Meanwhile, while we're on the topic of debating Rodgers' worthiness as an MVP candidate, let's talk briefly about Hub Arkush, Chicago-based NFL writer, been around a long time. He said he wouldn't vote for Rodgers because he was a bad guy, biggest jerk in the league. Weird statements. I mean, what are we doing? However, I do think that there's an element that should be considered if a guy's general bedside manner impacts the rest of his team in a negative way. Are you a good leader? Do you bring people with you? I think that's part of what value is. This isn't just the most outstanding player. It's not the mop, it's the move. So it matters. It's not going to matter to me in Rodgers' case. He has not done anything that has negated his performance on the field to a detriment. But what was your reaction to that?
I don't like that in this MVP discussion. Now, I do think I don't. I mean, unless
even in the vein that I mentioned.
The thing that I would factor in is I think Brady and Rodgers both have the best cases and they both have great cases. And if you're trying to debate between both of them, I think the idea that Rodgers missed a football game, just that fact, no matter how it happened, is also part of it, right? One guy is going to play 17 games, one guy's going to play 16 if Rodgers plays, whatever it is. I would view it like that, just as a blanket. This guy played more football. I thought Brady played better football in 2016 than Matt Ryan, who had crazy numbers, but Brady missed 4 games. It's tough to add the value 100%. Argument when he missed 4 games, right? So if Aaron Rodgers added 0 value to his football team in that one game against the Chiefs where Jordan Love had to play football, that's where I think it kind of comes in. I don't think you guys, us, I don't think we're paid to judge character because who's the arbiter of character and who's gonna try to do it. So, we work in numbers a lot at PFF. I would try to hang with those numbers as much as possible rather than trying to judge character.
And that is certainly, I think that you are at a polar opposite end in terms of you're looking at hard data. You're not looking at who's smiling at who and who's high-fiving. In the vein of more of a columnist and more of a gauger of a team's personality and what guys bring to it. Look, James White is not one of the best running backs in the league, but what he brings to the Patriots makes him a valuable player.
Absolutely.
So there is a value component. If I vote for Rodgers, do you feel as if we wouldn't be friends anymore?
Listen, you're allowed to be wrong. You are allowed to be wrong. But I think in this case, Tom Brady is the guy. Let me just bring one more thing to the equation, because as a columnist, you're a storyteller, right? And you do a great job of telling stories. Let me paint this picture for you. Back in week 4, the biggest game in regular season history, Tom Brady made one of the best throws of his entire career. I think it was one of the best throws of his career, and you will not see it one more time for the rest of your life because it got dropped by Antonio Brown. Tom Brady in New England against Belichick in the most hyped game in history, in the rain, where he wasn't having his best game. He's missing a few throws, but in the rain, put the ball on Antonio Brown's hands on a game-winning drive that would have been the game-winning touchdown, and it got dropped. And again, this is what I feel like we're able to do here at PFF, is to say that special moment. You would have written a beautiful column about it the next day, Tom.
You're right.
It would have been beautiful. But instead, the Bucs had to settle for merely a game-winning field goal. And that's it. It was still a game-winning drive, and the Bucs win and all that stuff. But imagine if Antonio Brown catches that ball. We're seeing that throw for the rest of eternity. And Brady has that moment. He's got a walk-off overtime win against the Bills, even though that wasn't all him. And he's got this incredible walk-off moment against the Jets. Sure, it's the Jets. But he took the dude off the practice squad, pump faked a corner, and threw a walk-off after going 93 yards with no timeouts. Brady's got those special moments too, even though some of them maybe don't show up in the highlight reel eventually.
Fair. Horseshoes, hand grenades, not drop touchdown passes. Close doesn't matter in drop touchdown passes. The same way when people said that Brady didn't play well against the New Orleans Saints because he had too many picks in the NFC Championship game last year. I said, no, sorry. He staked them to the lead. They were staked to the lead.
I thought he was so good in the first half. He didn't have a great second half. Overall, he played a good game against in the NFC Championship last year.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a great Rorschach test. Is that how you say it?
Rorschach.
You look at
the test. Yeah.
We're all going to view it differently. But far be it from me to be a Tom Brady hater. Stevie, thank you very much. Happy New Year. Get out of your parents' house. Go find yourself, will you?
Thanks, Tommy. Always a pleasure. I love it back here, though.